On May 1st, 2017, in Severodvinsk, Russia, a woman was viciously attacked in her flat by a man who showed no mercy. In the brutal struggle, she was terrified and desperate as she fought for her life. Amid this life-threatening chaos, her 15-year-old son returned home. As he stepped inside, the horrifying sight stopped him in his tracks. Without hesitation, driven by courage beyond his years, he rushed to defend his mother. But this heroic act came at a terrible cost. The attacker, with brutal and unrelenting force, turned his fury on him instead. Their assailant fled, leaving both mother and son battered and seemingly lifeless. But the horror of that day was only the beginning of their story. This case hit me hard. The bravery of this young lad is out of this world, and we'd all like to think that we'd do the same. There are a few twists in this case which left me with mixed emotions, but it all began from the actions of a violent man who should never have been there in the first place. There's not a great deal of images for this video, so please bear with me on that, but there's a lot to get through in this short video. But before we dive in, if you find this video fascinating, then please drop it a like and leave me a comment below. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing and following me on Instagram. It all really helps. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. This case begins in a communal apartment in Severodvinsk, Russia, where tensions were already brewing. The mother, Natalia Krapovin, had repeatedly pleaded with the authorities to prevent Roman Pronin, a convicted murderer recently released from prison, from moving into their neighborhood. Her concerns were justified. This was a densely populated area with many families, and Pronin posed an undeniable threat. Despite her warnings, Pronin was allowed to settle nearby, creating an atmosphere of unease. Little is known about the personal backgrounds of those involved, but what unfolded on May 1st, 2017 was a tragedy set in motion by that decision. That fateful day would leave a lasting scar, not just on Natalia and her family, but on the entire community. On that tragic day, Roman Pronin, heavily intoxicated, approached Natalia near her flat and propositioned her for intimacy. When she rejected his advances, his anger turned into violence. He forced his way into her home and began to brutally beat her. The assault escalated as he grabbed a knife, pinned her down, and stabbed her repeatedly in a horrific frenzy. At this horrifying moment, 15-year-old Vanya Krapovin returned home from school. What he walked into was a nightmare. His mother, bloodied and screaming, pinned beneath a man who was relentlessly stabbing her. Without hesitation, Vanya's instinct to protect his mother took over. He picked up a dumbbell nearby and charged at Pronin. Unfortunately, Pronin wrestled the dumbbell from Vanya and struck him on the head with it, delivering at least 3 devastating blows. The force of the attack crushed Vanya's skull, leaving him gravely injured. The room fell silent. Natalia lay motionless in a pool of blood, and Vanya collapsed beside her. Believing he had killed them both, Pronin fled the scene, leaving behind the devastating aftermath of his violence. Not long after fleeing the scene, Pronin asked a friend to help him dispose of the bodies, but instead of assisting, the friend immediately phoned the police. The authorities quickly arrested Pronin, and an ambulance was dispatched to help Vanya and Natalia. The aftermath was grim. Vanya fell into a coma for 9 months. His skull shattered and his brain severely damaged. Natalia was left with 27 stab wounds and was fighting for her life in the hospital. Miraculously, both survived, but their journeys of recovery would take vastly different paths. 37-year-old Pronin was charged with double manslaughter. Despite claiming his innocence, he said that he was merely breaking up a fight between the mother and son. The courts dismissed his story and he was sentenced to 14 years in a strict regime colony. Months later, Natalia was discharged from the hospital after extensive treatment, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. Vanya faced a far greater battle. Surgeons removed part of his brain and most of the frontal bone of his skull. His injuries needed costly titanium plates and long-term medical care. A national fundraising campaign on a popular Russian TV show began and contributed to the cause. A doctor said, whilst Vanya was in a coma, he is in a vegetative state. He cannot see or hear us. Probably for us, these books and songs were even more important than for Vanya himself. About a year after the attack, Vanya began to show small but significant signs of recovery. He started recognizing his nurses and was able to eat simple foods such as porridge and mashed meals, giving everyone a glimmer of hope. Once his condition stabilized, his journey through various medical facilities began. He was first transferred to the Arkhangelsk Regional Children's Hospital, where his care continued under specialized supervision. From there, he was sent to a clinic in St. Petersburg and eventually to the prestigious Moscow Research Institute of Emergency Children's Surgery. Between intensive courses at the Research Institute, Vanya stayed at the Martha and Mary Convent. The convent provided him with a supportive environment for rehabilitation, offering not only medical care but also a place of peace and recovery, as he fought to regain some semblance of a normal life. However, Natalia struggled to cope with the trauma of the attack. She visited Vanya only twice during his stay in hospital, turning to alcohol as a means of coping and blaming herself for her son's suffering. Her limited presence sparked public outrage. As the case was highly publicized, Natalia faced judgment and scrutiny from the nation. In a tearful interview on a TV show, she addressed the backlash. She said, and quote, "I beg to be pardoned for not visiting him more frequently, and I ask you, please, help my son. I don't remember what happened that day. Everybody now tells me that I am to blame for everything. I am ready to be treated. I want to be with my son." In October 2018, Vanya was back in intensive care. On what would have been his 16th birthday, he was surrounded by medical staff as he battled complications from the flu. His condition worsened, straining his already fragile body. In those final days, Igor Komizorov, a senior assistant to the chairman of the investigation committee, who had supported Vanya from the beginning, performed a baptism for Vanya right in his hospital ward, as he was not baptized at the time. Komizorov became Vanya's godfather. Tragically, just a few days later, Vanya lost consciousness and passed away. His battle, filled with extraordinary courage and resilience, ended. Recognizing his bravery, Vanya was posthumously awarded the Order of Courage. He was also honored with the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation's medal, Valor and Courage. These awards were a testament to the strength he had shown in defending his mother against unimaginable odds. Meanwhile, Roman Pronin, serving his sentence in a regime colony, faced new charges as the case was reopened following Vanya's death. Pronin stubbornly stuck to his original story, claiming he had merely intervened to break up a fight between Natalia and Vanya. Pronin stated, "I ask you to make a fair decision and not deprive me of my freedom, because I did not want death, but wanted to prevent a quarrel between Natalia and Vanya. I want to state once again that the crime was committed by Natalia. I saw it with my own eyes." Despite the gravity of the evidence against him, Pronin continued to deny responsibility, while the maximum sentence he could have received was life imprisonment. Unfortunately, I was not able to find the verdict. However, given the national attention this case received, I would hope that justice was served and Pronin faced the full weight of the law for his actions. I wanted to share with you Vanya's story and the bravery he's shown at such a young age. Most people wish they were that courageous, but he actually was. And he also saved his mother's life. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.
He's here. You ready? Just stay there, pal. Stay there. Just stay there. Just put your hands behind your back.
This is Jack Crawley. At just 19 years old, he was arrested on suspicion of murder, a crime that, without police intervention, would have been the first of many. Crawley was no ordinary teenager, obsessed with the macabre. His aim was to target and brutally kill men he met through dating apps. What made his crimes even more chilling was his lack of remorse. He was caught on camera smirking as his charges were read out. Labelled extremely dangerous by a judge, Crawley seemed, to those who knew him, like nothing more than an oddball. Few could have imagined he was capable of such depravity. His crimes were gruesome, calculated, and undeniably sinister. If he had been born a decade or two earlier, in an era without digital evidence to track him, his killing spree would surely have been far more prolific. Jack Crawley had all the makings to become one of Britain's worst ever serial killers. How he was able to do such things at such a young age is terrifying. I feel that it's almost not real to him, and that maybe now he's in prison, or maybe in years to come he will realise the severity of what he has done. Not much is known about Jack Crawley's childhood. It appears as if he led an unremarkable life. His parents divorced when he was 12, and he did suffer physical abuse from his father. From what I can gather, this was along the lines of beatings. He was seen by people who knew him as a bit of an oddball. He would do things like wear his hood up during the peak of summer. His friends also described him as a fantasist, often making up things that had happened to him in order to impress them. By the age of 19, Crawley had grown into an imposing 6'3" and was working as a security guard at Carlisle's Cumberland Infirmary. But his life outside of work was anything but conventional. In his spare time, he dealt weed and often posted selfies on social media with wads of cash, hinting at a blend of arrogance and detachment from societal norms. Another man who worked at Carlisle's Cumberland Infirmary was 56-year-old Paul Taylor, a catering manager and army veteran. Paul was a devoted husband and father of two, a man deeply rooted in family life. Yet, despite his outward image as a loving and dependable father who would do anything for his children, Paul had a secret that, unknowingly, would lead to unimaginable tragedy. Paul and Jack Crawley had no connection at the hospital, but their lives crossed paths in a much darker way. Paul, in his spare time, had been using the gay dating app Grindr in secrecy. He began talking to Crawley, and the two reportedly met multiple times for intimate encounters. Paul, careful to keep this part of his life hidden from his family, had no idea of the danger lurking behind Crawley's seemingly innocent persona. What Paul couldn't have known was that Crawley had an ulterior motive, and it would lead to horrifying consequences. Over the course of 2023, Crawley and Paul had met a few times and built some trust with one another. They had been meeting for intimate encounters in secrecy. On June 16th, Paul is seen buying 3 bottles of poppers from a shop in Carlisle, a substance which is popular for boosting intimate desire. All seemed to be going well between them, but by October 18th, everything was about to take a sinister turn. That evening, Paul and Crawley arranged to meet again through Grindr, selecting a secluded spot in Carlisle as they had done before. The evening began as any other. Paul's wife saw him laughing at the television, carefree and content. Later, she kissed him goodnight, unaware that this simple gesture would be her last memory of him alive. After she went to bed, Paul quietly left their home in Annan, a town not far from Carlisle, and headed towards the meeting place. He arrived at 11:39 p.m. Meanwhile, Crawley was also on his way, but CCTV footage revealed his chilling preparations. Stopping en route, he purchased coal and 2 lighters. As he walked to the location, he listened to the track Romantic Homicide on repeat, a macabre soundtrack for what lay ahead, with lyrics such as, "I killed you and I don't even regret it. I can't believe I said it, but it's true. I hate you." Most disturbingly, he carried a claw hammer with him, his intentions now certainly sinister. At 11:27 a.m, Crawley was seen on CCTV arriving at the meeting spot. What happened next remains partially unclear, but what is known paints a horrific picture. Whether the two got into Paul's Vauxhall Corsa or spoke briefly is uncertain, but what is certain is that Crawley wasted little time. Suddenly, he pulled out the hammer and launched a brutal attack. He struck Paul's face and skull at least 10 times, delivering blow after blow of unrelenting force. The violence was so severe that Paul's face was described in court as being totally smashed in. Desperate to defend himself, Paul raised his arms, but the strikes broke his elbow, shattering it completely. It was a horrific and brutal death, bludgeoned to death by a hammer. Once Crawley was certain Paul was dead, he dragged his body to the boot of Paul's own car. From there, Crawley drove to a remote and desolate location that he was familiar with, Finglandrig Woods. In the darkness, Crawley made a fire with the charcoal he had bought earlier, but he was only able to burn small portions of Paul's leg and arm before the smell became too much and he gave up. As he was doing this, he claimed to have vomited and passed out numerous times. Afterwards, he buried the semi-charred remains in a shallow grave. Calmly and methodically, Crawley then wiped down the car, cleaning as much blood as he could to eliminate the traces of his heinous crime. Jack Crawley, at just 19 years old, had committed an act of chilling brutality, a calculated and shocking murder that would leave the entire community stunned. By 11 a.m, the morning after the murder, Crawley showed no signs of remorse. Calmly, he ordered Uber Eats to his home, undisturbed by the horrific crimes he had just committed. Around the same time, Paul Taylor's wife Maria reported him missing, her growing unease turning into dread. Paul's daughter, Bethany, sent him a desperate text. "Please come back, Dad." But the chilling truth of Paul's fate would soon begin to unravel. On October 19th, Crawley met up with his friend and fellow hospital security guard, Marcus Goodfellow. At 7:30 a.m, the two planned to drive Paul's car, a Vauxhall Corsa, to Appleby, where Crawley had arranged to sell it for £2,000. Marcus had been working a night shift, and once he had finished, he had gone to meet Crawley, and this is why they had set off so early. Their plan, however, took an unexpected turn. At 8:45 a.m, with Crawley at the wheel, they crashed near Langwathby. Without hesitation, they abandoned the vehicle and called one of Marcus's friends to pick them up. During the ride back to Carlisle, Marcus's friend later described Crawley's demeanour as, and quote, "giddy and excited." Crawley openly spoke about someone dying, almost flaunting the fact, claiming, and quote, "the world's a better place without him. It's getting rid of one more rat." He also went on to say that he was a substance dealer and that he was worse than Jeffrey Dahmer. These statements, all delusions and not true, were references to Paul Taylor. Later that afternoon, the police discovered the abandoned car. Inside, they found heavy bloodstains, 2 bottles of poppers, and intimate paraphernalia in the boot. Alarming evidence that hinted at foul play. It was enough to confirm their worst suspicions. By the following day, October 20th, the first official missing persons appeal for Paul Taylor was launched, complete with photos of his car, in hopes someone could provide answers. Days passed, and on October 26th, Paul's birthday, a second appeal was issued. To the outside world, Paul had simply vanished, but investigators knew that they were dealing with something far more sinister. Suspicion soon fell on Jack Crawley. Now I am not sure how. Maybe officers checked Paul's phone records, but I'm not sure. But soon enough, Crawley was arrested for questioning.
Stay there, pal. Just stay there, stay there, stay there. Just stay there. Yeah. Okay.
Pull that down, please. It's very annoying.
Happy? Alright, so this moment in time, at 11:54, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. You do not have to say anything, be my army defence, if you do not mention, when questioned, some shenanigan in court.
When confronted by police, Crawley denied even knowing Paul Taylor, weaving the first of many lies in a desperate attempt to cover his tracks. But as investigators dug deeper, damning evidence began to emerge. During a search of Crawley's bedroom at his Sheehan Crescent home, police uncovered a chilling array of items. Among them was a latex pig mask, a skull mask, cable ties, rope, and gaffer tape, tools that shown Crawley's sinister intent. This was seen as a murder kit, but the most incriminating discovery lay hidden beneath the back garden decking. It was a bottle of poppers. It was the same found in Paul Taylor's abandoned car, and it even had traces of Paul's DNA on it. For a time, Crawley managed to evade justice. Without sufficient evidence to charge him, the police released him on bail in mid-November under strict conditions to stay at his grandparents' house in Carlisle. But Crawley had other plans. On New Year's Eve, he skipped bail. In a bizarre attempt to disguise himself, he wore a Hagrid-style wig and used a fake European accent before boarding a train to Penrith. From there, he travelled across the UK, passing through Aberdeen and Glasgow, spending nights in both, before arriving in York on January 4th. Far from laying low, Crawley's twisted mind began plotting again. Almost immediately, he started planning a second deadly mission, one that would rival the horrific brutality of his first crime. When Crawley arrived in York, the first thing he did was purchase a claw hammer from the city's tool station, the same weapon he used in his first murder. He then used Grindr to lure his next victim, again targeting an older gay man by arranging a secret hookup. For the unsuspecting man, this was meant to be a consensual encounter, set to take place at a remote location 10 miles from York. At the agreed meeting point, the man picked Crawley up in his car, and together they drove to a secluded area near Acasta Malbis. The man would later say that Crawley seemed nervous and on edge. Once they arrived, the man attempted to initiate an intimate act, but as he performed, he noticed something was off. Crawley was not aroused. Without warning, Crawley unleashed a brutal attack. Using the hammer he had brought, he struck the man repeatedly on the head, face and arm, in a violent frenzy as the man knelt below him. Blow after blow rained down as Crawley's victim struggled desperately to pull away from the assault. This time, however, Crawley's plan did not succeed. Unlike Paul Taylor, this victim was able to fight back. Despite his injuries, he managed to wrestle the hammer away from Crawley and then threatened him with it. Realizing he had lost control of the situation, Crawley fled the scene, leaving the man bloodied but alive. In the hours that followed, Crawley committed a burglary at a nearby home, stealing clothing, a backpack and a phone charger in an attempt to escape detection. While the victim sustained injuries to his face and head, he survived the ordeal, but it was clear that Crawley had planned to kill again. It was only the victim's resilience and quick thinking that stopped the second attempt of murder. Jack Crawley's second arrest came on February 2nd, 2024, in the city of Bath. This time, he was caught in possession of a knife and a quantity of weed. Following his arrest, Crawley was charged with both murder and attempted murder. Here, you can see the officer reading out Jack's charges, but he simply does not care and begins to smirk at some commotion happening elsewhere. In my opinion, He is trying to show that he is in control. During his initial interrogations, he strongly denied killing Paul Taylor. However, after 3 months in custody, on May 1st, 2024, Crawley finally admitted to the murder, and he revealed the location of Paul's remains, buried in a shallow grave. The trial began on October 1st, and it was here that Crawley's delusions and fabrications were fully exposed. Taking the stand, Crawley spun a bizarre and outlandish tale, claiming he had been working for a mysterious criminal organisation. He said, and quote, "I worked for a mafia gang," later referring to the gang as Central Grove Mafia. Crawley alleged that Paul's death was the result of a car theft gone wrong. According to his account, he needed Paul's vehicle to complete a job for the gang, a raid on a weed farm, and another burglary. He claimed he had been in debt to the gang since his teenage years and was regularly forced to tax, aka steal, from other criminals. Pressed by prosecutor Mr. McLachlan to provide names of his supposed gang members, Crawley refused, saying, and quote, "If I give you names, do you think they're going to be happy about that? What do you think they'll do? They know where my family is. They know where my mum lives." Crawley described the events of October 18th, saying that he punched Paul Taylor twice in the face, causing the older man to collapse to the ground. He also claimed that as he fell, he hit his head on the concrete, and then he lay there, making unsettling and quote, snorting noises. Crawley said, "I knelt down beside him. There was blood on my hands. I couldn't find a pulse." He then said he tried to revive him using CPR. He was desperate, but his efforts failed. What followed was a chilling admission. Crawley said that after realising Paul was dead and after failing to burn the body, he then resorted to using a mallet to shatter his skull. He said, and quote, "I wanted rid of the body." He believed that the skull would, and quote, crumble into ash, making it easier to conceal. The cold, calculated nature of his confession revealed a deeply disturbing mindset, one focused entirely on erasing any trace of his crime. Gruesome evidence presented to the jury contradicted Crawley's narrative. Graphic images revealed Paul's shattered skull, broken into 35 distinct pieces, with 230 additional fragments scattered across the area, and some fragments were never recovered. When the court pathologist described the extensive injuries, Crawley suddenly appeared nauseous. The colour drained from him, and then he was sick in the dock. Security staff escorted him from the glass-fronted dock, while attendants covered the area with tissue. He had no problem committing these crimes in the darkness, but in the cold light of day, he was physically sick at the sight of his own crimes. In another attempt to explain away incriminating evidence, Jack offered an absurd explanation for Paul's fractured elbow, which experts identified as a defensive injury. He claimed it was caused accidentally when he slammed the car boot on Paul's arm whilst putting his body in the boot. He also claimed that he bought the charcoal and lighters on his way to meet Paul because it was his job to raid the weed farm and he may have had to burn it down, so he needed something to start a fire. Despite Crawley's increasingly desperate lies and delusional claims, the evidence told a far more harrowing and damning story. His fabricated tale of mafia involvement unravelled under scrutiny, leaving little doubt about his guilt. He also claimed that he attacked the second man in York because he had pulled a knife out on him during their meeting, but the man would later testify in court and said, and quote, "He didn't say anything. It was all very quick. He just basically wanted to hurt me. He was very aggressive." Only Jack Crawley knows the true motives behind his horrifying actions. In court, prosecutors suggested he had an unhealthy obsession with Jeffrey Dahmer, speculating that he might have targeted gay men in a similar vein. Yet, the true reason behind his gruesome choices may always remain a mystery. During the trial, Crawley was confronted with his lies, particularly his outlandish claim of being involved with a mafia gang. "Your life is just one big lie, isn't it, Mr. Crawley?" the prosecutor asked. Crawley responded, Do you say I'm lying about my involvement in gang crime? You say I'm making it all up? The prosecutor replied, I am suggesting you are not controlled by anyone. You did what you did. You killed a man for no reason. That's what I'm guessing. In the end, the jury found Crawley guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 37 years. If and when he is released, Crawley will be a similar age to his victim, Paul Taylor, at the time of his death. As the sentence was delivered, Crawley showed no emotion, his demeanour as cold as his crimes. Meanwhile, 20-year-old Marcus Goodfellow, who was also on trial for assisting Crawley in disposing of Paul Taylor's car, was acquitted. The court determined that Marcus had no knowledge of the murder. After the verdict, Paul Taylor's family issued a heart-wrenching statement. Our lives and world were completely torn apart on October 18th, 2023, with the murder of Paul. To us, he was a husband and a dad, gentle and loving. For many years, Paul worked to protect his country, sacrificing time as a husband and a father. Now was supposed to be the time for us to be that family unit. We grieve the loss of that future and of Paul himself. Losing him in these circumstances and the torment and hurt this has caused has been horrendous and indescribable. Paul will be dearly missed and he will remain in our thoughts forever. To think, Jack Crawley is so young, and now he's going to spend the best years of his life locked up with some of the worst criminals in Britain. What a horrific existence. I feel sorry for Paul and his family for having to go through such a horrific ordeal. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane. Violent end. For 2 days, the police and local residents were all looking for the much-loved person. This was not normal, and she had no reason to simply vanish. It didn't take long for authorities to catch her assailant, who, chillingly, confessed to the gruesome details with the hopes that people would take pity on him. But it didn't stop there. This wasn't just any criminal. He was already a convicted murderer, a man who had been imprisoned twice for serious crimes. So, why was he free? And how had he managed to unleash such terror once again? In his own haunting words, he admitted, I can't stop myself. This case blew me away when I heard of it. Like, I can understand a killer being released with some rehabilitation, but after 2 serious crimes, and then they're released with no supervision, it just sounds crazy to me. They need strict monitoring or remain in prison. Polina Bovoy was a bright 16-year-old student living in the small town of Divnogorsk, just outside the city of Krasnoyarsk, where she often spent her time. She was popular, creative, and mature for her age. Polina had a close-knit circle of friends and a great relationship with her family. From a young age, she had a passion for crafting, drawing, cross-stitching, and making bracelets from rubber bands. She just liked crafting in general. Her father, Andrew, a police officer, was a big influence in her life. For his birthday, when she was just 14, she put her creative skills to work, using a wood-burning kit to make him this heartfelt gift. On her 15th birthday, Polina received a guitar, a gift that quickly became her most treasured possession. She would spend hours writing songs and poetry, her lyrics filled with hopes and dreams for the future. One thing Polina had planned for the future was a career in the military. She hoped to become a psychologist, and she was on her way to military school. A friend said this about her, and quote, she sang songs, played the ukulele, even recorded a couple of tracks. Well, it was more of an amateur thing. Quite a creative girl. The whole city knew her, most of them for sure, almost all teenagers. I think she had a lot of friends. Of course, there were parties. She's an ordinary 16-year-old. Polina's family had a strong bond, and her parents knew all her friends. There were no secrets, and Polina, being well-behaved and responsible, always kept them informed if she had any major plans or intended to be away. That's why, when she failed to check in on that fateful day, July 22nd, 2023, her parents were immediately alarmed And then began their horrific nightmare. Polina had arranged to meet her best friend for a walk near the city centre that evening. She promised her father that she'd be back by 10 p.m, and this was normal and something she always abided by. She was wearing a black dress with white sandals, and she left the home carrying her mobile phone and a few belongings in a small bag, ready for an evening out. Later, as the clock struck 10, Andrew grew concerned. Polina hadn't returned. He tried calling her, but her phone was dead. Alarmed, he immediately contacted her friend, who explained that Polina had called her halfway to meeting her at 6:24 p.m. to say that her phone was about to die, but assured her that she was still on her way. Her friend waited at the meeting spot for half an hour after they planned to meet. She tried to phone Polina, but her phone was dead. Her friend assumed that she must have had a change of plans and went home, and so her friend made her way home. Andrew's worry intensified as he frantically called every friend and family member he could think of, but no one had seen or heard from Polina. This was unlike her. She never disappeared, especially without telling her parents. Both Andrew and his wife Oksana knew, even at this point, that something was terribly wrong. Without delay, they went to the police station and filled out a missing person report, and immediately a desperate search began for their beloved daughter. Because Polina's father was a cop himself, a lot of the officers searching for her knew her personally. It was like they had all lost one of their own. For 2 relentless days, search teams worked around the clock, scouring every corner of Divnogorsk. Then, on the 3rd day, at 7:30 p.m, a group of volunteers trained in locating missing youth made the grim discovery. Just 30 meters from the R257 Yenzi highway, which led to the city centre, near a secluded viaduct, they found Polina's remains. The scene was horrifying. Polina's throat had been slashed so deeply, it was as if her neck had been stabbed open. She was found almost naked and loosely wearing her underwear. Her dress and bra were discarded nearby, and her bag and phone were lying next to her, but her other belongings were missing. Officers also discovered a knife close to her body, a suspected murder weapon. They sent this along with some DNA evidence found on the remains of Polina for testing. Within hours, results came back, identifying a suspect in the criminal database, a man named Ivan Papenko. He came from a nearby village, but he currently had no fixed abode. But officers were well on his trail, and after a short search for the suspect, he was found in a flat where he had been staying with a female friend he had recently made and her mother. Special forces entered the flat, and although Papenko tried to resist, within seconds he was on the floor, handcuffed. During his arrest, he tried to hide his identity, but obviously this did not work. Shockingly, Papenko showed no remorse and was eager to tell the grisly details of his crime. Even more disturbingly, this was not his first offence. He was a repeat offender, previously imprisoned for 2 other serious crimes. This only deepened the agony of Polina's family as they grappled with the brutal loss of their daughter and the question, how had this man with such a violent past been allowed back on the streets, and what exactly had happened to their beloved daughter? Ivan Papenko had spent half his life behind bars. He began his criminal life in 2004, where he would steal and rob cars. But 2009 is when he committed his first serious crime, when he was just 20 years old. On the morning of July 21st, 2009, Ivan Papenko awoke to the familiar sting of a hangover. Life for him lately was an endless cycle of drinking and regret. Each day was bleeding into the next. Unemployed and desperate for money, he knew he needed quick cash. A plan formed in his mind, simple yet effective. He'd gather scrap metal with his friends, Laventriev and Voyakin, and then go and sell it. When he asked them, the men agreed, and after exchanging the metal for a few rubles, they stopped at a nearby shop, buying 2 bottles of port wine and several packets of cigarettes. The trio found a spot near a local school and settled down to drink. the wine dulling the edges of reality. Time rolled on as they smoked and drank. It was a bleak existence. But as afternoon fell, they made their way to Laurentreve's house, seeking a place to continue their drinking session. At the house, they kept drinking, but soon the alcohol was gone. Papenko and Voyakin went out to find more alcohol, returning with 2 bottles of bath liquid, a harsh concoction that people drank to get high cheaply. When they returned, Larentreve had fallen asleep. The 2 men didn't care. They diluted the liquid with water and began drinking it, burning their throats as they drank. The 2 men began to get rowdy with one another in a drunken state. The noise awoke Larentreve, who rose and joined them, but this time he held an axe in his hand. Offering Papenko a drink, he began hurling insults, mocking Papenko with slurred obscenities. The tension grew thick. Voyakin, sensing the brewing conflict, excused himself to bed, leaving Papenko and Larentreve alone in the dim light of the room. As Larentreve continued his mocking, Papenko's patience thinned. He stared at the axe in Larentreve's hand. "Give me the axe," he demanded, in a low voice. Larentreve, almost amused, handed it over, but his insults did not stop. "Enough," Papenko said, gripping the axe tightly. His voice dropped to a menacing tone. He warned him, saying, "I'll kill you if you don't stop." But Larentreve was fearless, perhaps too drunk to sense the danger. He leaned forward, lowering his head, and said, "Go ahead, hit me." In that instant, something snapped within Papenko. He swung the axe, the first blow landing hard against Larentreve's neck. Blood splattered as he struck again and again, each blow a release of rage and brutal violence. Papenko lost count as he struck his friend's lifeless body over and over. When he finally stopped, the gruesome scene around him slowly came into focus. Blood splattered across the walls and staining the ceiling as well. Papenko stared at his blood-covered hands, thinking about what he had just done. He stumbled to where Voyakin slept, waking him and telling him that they needed to leave. He washed himself, trying to scrub away the blood. Then the 2 men left the house, abandoning the horror that had just happened. It was Larentreve's sister who would first enter the house afterwards. She was greeted by a sight she'd never forget, the scene of her brother's brutal end. Later in court, he claimed he hadn't meant to kill his friend, yet he struck him at least 10 times in a brutal frenzy. Papenko only served 5 years for this crime and was released in 2014 aged 25. And just 10 days after leaving the strict regime colony, he struck again. On the afternoon of August 13th, 2014, between 4 and 5 p.m, on a secluded path in Divnogorsk, Ivan Papenko was walking around looking for his next victim. Hidden beneath his clothes, he carried an air pistol. He waited in the bushes, eyes scanning the path for someone who could become his prey. A young woman passed by, unaware of the man watching her every move. Papenko acted swiftly, closing the distance between them. He caught up and pushed her from behind, and as she stumbled forward, she felt the cold press of a gun against her back. Heart pounding, she obeyed his command to leave the safety of the path and enter the forest. With every step, they disappeared deeper away from any chance of help. Once Papenko felt they were a comfortable distance away, he struck her with the handle of the pistol, the impact dazing her, fear taking over. "Give me your purse," he demanded. Shaking, she handed over the small bag, which held everything she had, 4,100 rubles, and her mobile phone. But Papenko wasn't finished. He hit her again, this time in the face. He then demanded she undress and lie down on her back. She tried to resist, tears streaming down her face as she pleaded, but her pleas were no good. His grip tightened around her neck as she struggled for air, and her strength began to fade. Papenko then essayed the woman. She endured the assault in a terrified silence, realizing that each second might be her last. But Papenko had other plans. When he was finished, he dragged her to a ravine, forcing her to lie down with her head pressed against the ground. "Count to 150, he demanded. She obeyed, counting each second, hoping that he would be gone when she finally looked up. When she could no longer hear his footsteps, she lifted her head. He was gone. She scrambled to her feet, her heart racing, and grabbed her phone and purse. Barely able to process the horror, she made her way home, then to the hospital, seeking both safety and evidence of what had just happened. Meanwhile, Popenko was already attempting to disappear. He reached the bus station, changed his clothes, and fled to his hometown in Lenivo, seeking refuge in familiar territory. But 2 days later, on August 15th, the law caught up with him. He was arrested and brought back. In court, Popenko offered no defense, only admitting to the horror that had unfolded that day. He was charged with essaying, violent intimate acts, and robbery, and once again he found himself in the strict regime colony. On July 14th, 2023, Ivan Popenko was released from prison once again. This time, he was supposed to be under strict supervision, requiring daily check-ins and restricting him from leaving his hometown. But Popenko, knowing the system's weaknesses, appealed against the supervision order. That appeal process took longer than his remaining prison time, and through a loophole, he walked out entirely unsupervised. He was free, unchecked, and ready to descend back into chaos. And just 8 days after his release, he did just that. Not much is known about Popenko's early life, though one of his former teachers shared glimpses into his bleak childhood. Popenko and his older brother, Andrei, grew up in a boarding school, but after the school closed, when Popenko was only 10, she lost track of him. She did, however, recall visiting their parents' home, describing it as a squalid nightmare. She said, and quote, "A hut, a bed with a wire mesh, no sheets, no blankets, smoke filled the apartment, 3-litre milk jars on the table, flies buzzing around." She added, those parents deserved life sentences back then. At age 11, Popenko was diagnosed with multiple mental health issues and spent time in a psychiatric facility, drifting through a fractured childhood. This was all I could find on his background. By the time he was an adult, he had become a drifter, a dangerous and unpredictable figure with a growing record of violence. Following his release in July 2023, Popenko had no money, no purpose. He quickly fell back into old habits, moving in with a woman he had just met and her mother, sharing a cramped flat. The drinking resumed immediately, and thus continued the endless spiral. On the morning of July 22nd, he woke up hungover, broke and desperate. He needed more alcohol, but had no way to get it. That's when he made a plan. He would rob someone. He made his way to a secluded viaduct near the scene of his past crime. Standing there, surveying the area, he later told officers, and quote, "I didn't have any specific victim. I was just standing there and waiting for the first person to walk down. Then his opportunity arrived. A girl was walking down the viaduct, unaware of the predator lying in wait. Popenko approached her, closing with each step. As soon as he reached her, he threw a brutal punch to her face, knocking her to the ground. As she lay there, stunned and terrified, he watched her struggle. He said, and quote, "I approached her, hit her like this." He later demonstrated to officers. Then I helped her up and said, "Come with me." He led her into the depths of the forest, and the horrors were only just beginning. Once they were far enough away from prying eyes, he began to beat her. He demanded her valuables and money, which she gave to him, hoping he might leave. But Popenko wasn't finished. He then essayed her. He literally took everything from her. Afterwards, he forced her to lie face down on the ground. He tied her legs together with a strip of cloth that he had brought. He turned to leave, but a dark thought gnawed at him. What if she reported him? He said, and quote, "I was scared she would go to the police and tell them everything." He then returned to her, wrapped his hands around her neck and strangled her until the struggling stopped. He thought it was over. He thought she was dead. As he stood up to leave, he noticed her body twitch, life still lingering within her. Enraged, he grabbed a large shard of glass from the ground nearby, and he stabbed her repeatedly in the throat, slicing until her neck was torn open. In his frenzy, he dropped his own knife, a mistake that would lead to his quick capture. The forest fell silent as Papenko walked away, leaving behind his victim and the horrors he had inflicted. Following his swift capture at the flat where he had been hiding, Ivan Papenko was transferred to a pre-trial detention center where he would wait for judgment. During his trial, he seemed almost oblivious to the weight of his crimes, spending much of the proceedings with his gaze fixed on the floor, ignoring the murmurs and glares that filled the courtroom. The anger in the room was palpable. Spectators were enraged. One woman was quoted as saying, "Only a death sentence for this beast who abused her. What else? They need to be crushed. People like him cannot live. Give him to us, the people. We would tear him apart." When asked if he believed he should ever be free, Papenko responded, "No, because it's not a fact that I won't do this again." In a final statement, Papenko spoke to the court, claiming he deeply regretted his actions. He admitted having trouble sleeping at night, haunted, he said, by what he had done. In a tone that some would later describe as hollow, he pleaded for a second chance, asking the court to give him the opportunity to improve, to become a better person. But the court was unmoved. After hearing his words, the sentence was delivered: life in prison. Though Papenko would eventually have the right to appeal, he will spend the foreseeable future locked away, unable to hurt anyone again. The verdict was met with a sense of relief but also frustration. For some, no punishment could ever balance the scales for the lives he has shattered and the pain he has caused. The law in Russia is either in the process or has been changed, so cases like this cannot happen again. It's just a shame that these things have to happen to innocent people like Polina for that change to come. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane. November 24th, 1998, in the quiet town of Hyvinka, Finland, where violent crime was all but unheard of, something horrific happened. It began with a single severed leg discovered in a landfill. As the investigation unfolded, it would go down as the most gruesome in Finnish history. The killers weren't strangers, they were the victims' friends. Young, intoxicated, and led by a self-professed Satanist named Jano Elg, the group descended into the most deplorable acts, so horrific that the full details of the crime have been legally sealed from the public until 2038. This case is brutal, so much so that not all the information will be released until 2038, so not all the names are revealed, mainly being the victim and the background of the perpetrators. But we do know a lot of what happened, and it's truly shocking. It takes place in the 90s, and this case raised a lot of satanic panic in Finland, so I just want to be clear. I don't blame heavy metal or anything of the kind for this crime, but at the time it was this and Satanism that was seen as the cause. To grasp the true weight in the discovery of the leg lying lifeless amongst the waste, we must go back to where it all began. Hyvinka is a quiet town with around 47,000 residents. It was considered a peaceful escape from the chaos of the nearby city of Helsinki. It was the kind of place where crime rate was low and violent crime was virtually non-existent. Aside from a growing youth drinking culture, trouble was rare. Teenagers, often restless with boredom in such a quiet town, would end up drinking heavily, and this would occasionally lead them to committing petty crimes, such as minor theft, graffiti, and vandalism. Their drink of choice was a cheap, potent liquor with a nickname that roughly translated to kill juice. It was notorious amongst the town's youth, not for its danger, but for how easily it was obtained and consumed by them. But despite these issues, no one saw them as bad, just bored, troublesome maybe, but not dangerous, which is why the discovery of a severed human leg at the landfill stunned the residents of Hyvinka. In a place where little ever happened, Something truly horrific had just surfaced. The leg was believed to belong to a male, based on its size and the leg hair. But beyond that, investigators had very little to work with. Early estimates placed the man's age anywhere between 20 and 60 years of age, a frustratingly wide scope. And complicating matters even further, the landfill didn't just serve Hyvinka, it received waste from over 1 million people in the surrounding regions. Faced with this daunting range, authorities knew they needed more. A search of the landfill was immediately launched. It was slow, grueling work. Bucket by bucket, officers sifted through heaps of garbage, examining every scrap by hand. The task proved so overwhelming that recruits from the police academy were brought in to help. Cadaver dogs were deployed, trained to sniff out the faintest trace of human remains. As days drawn to a close, the Finnish military was assigned to guard the entire landfill because it was now officially a crime scene. A week passed before the next clue surfaced, a small piece of human stomach. It was tested and matched the DNA of the severed leg. Though only small, the tissue told investigators a great deal. After analysis, the male was now believed to be between 20 and 30 years of age. They had been a heavy drinker for many years and was significantly intoxicated at the time of death. While forensic analysis continued, the painstaking search of the landfill dragged on, but after 4 long weeks, just before Christmas, the excavation was called off. Only 2 pieces of the body had been recovered, the leg and part of the stomach. Still, the details they gathered painted a loose profile. A young man, likely from a low-income background, possibly living on benefits. Authorities began to search local welfare records for anyone who had not claimed their benefits for the last few weeks. And that's when they got their big break. A 23-year-old man had stopped collecting his payments. He hadn't been reported missing, but he had vanished without a trace. He lived only 20 kilometers from the landfill. He fit the profile. Police believed they had found their victim, but to this day, his identity remains sealed, protected by law, and the case files will remain locked until 2038. For the rest of this video, he would be referred to as Male A. Male A lived alone. He did not have many friends and must not have been close to his family, as he was not reported missing for weeks. Investigators asked around local people to see if they could work out his last whereabouts, and it wasn't long before the name Jarno Elg popped up. Male A did have a small group of friends, and he was last seen with them. They were all fans of heavy metal and wore typical goth attire, and the last known sighting of Male A was with this group of friends in Hyvinka. Police already knew of Jarno Elg and another member of the group, Mika Reiska. Mika had previous run-ins with the law, though nothing particularly serious, just the kind of trouble typical of the town's hard-drinking youth. Vandalism, brawling, and public disturbances. But Elg had a darker past. He had committed much more serious crimes and had been incarcerated in the past. Due to this, the authorities searched Elg's home. Nothing immediately screamed that a murder had taken place there, but a few unsettling things stood out. Notes referencing the Bible of Satan lay scattered about, ornate knives, skeleton decorations, skull-shaped jewelry, and even a gold-plated pendant engraved with the number 666. None of it was incriminating on its own, but given this was the height of satanic panic, it was enough to warrant a deeper search. What they found next changed everything. Traces of blood and DNA had been poorly scrubbed from the floor and ceilings. More evidence was found in the bathroom and inside a cupboard. There was so much biological evidence throughout the house that investigators began to wonder, had this happened more than once? There was no long manhunt, no slow unraveling clues. The suspects were quickly identified because, as it turned out, there were no others. On December 8th, 1998, police arrested 4 individuals, all of whom were supposed to be friends of male A. Their names were Jano Elg, 23, Mika Reiska, 21, Terry Tervashonka, 17, and a 16-year-old male whose identity remains protected due to his age. All were taken into custody. Elg in particular was disturbingly calm. He didn't shy away from the spotlight, he revelled in it. As he sat in the interrogation room, describing what would later be known as the most brutal crime in Finnish history, he laughed. Not nervously, not out of fear. He laughed because he enjoyed it. Jano Elg was born in 1975 into a deeply troubled family. He had a brother and a sister, and all 3 siblings reportedly struggled with severe mental health issues, including schizophrenia. From an early age, Elg's life went horribly wrong. He was bullied at school and began taking substances by the age of 10. Though details of his home life remain unknown, no youth spirals out of control that young without being failed by the people meant to protect them. As a teenager, Elg attempted to end everything multiple times. This led to repeated stays in psychiatric clinics, yet nothing ever seemed to work long term. He would always end up on the same dark path. His one passion was music, particularly black metal. The darker, the better for him. He also took the look of a typical black metal fan, the long black hair, loose jeans, band t-shirts, often featuring violent imagery and grim logos. It would intimidate those around him and pushed him further into isolation. Elg first came to the police's attention at just 16, inspired by a fringe trend within the black metal scene, a movement that many within the genre condemned. Between 1992 and 1996, over 50 churches were torched across Norway and Sweden, acts seen by the perpetrators as symbolic rejections of Christianity. Elg wanted to be part of that, so he attempted to burn down a local medieval church. He was arrested in 1991 and sentenced to nearly 2 years in a juvenile detention centre. When he got out, he didn't return to school. Instead, he went deeper into alcohol and substance abuse. Around this time, he also discovered Satanism, not as literal worship, but as a philosophy. For Elg, it became a doctrine of extreme individualism. Do what you want, feel no guilt, reject all moral constraints, laws, empathy, consequences. None of it mattered, so long as it felt good. This led him to another psychiatric stay in the summer of 1998. He met Terry Tervashonka. Terry had come from a stable, middle-class home in a small town just outside Helsinki. Her early life appeared normal until the age of 14, when she became addicted to heavy substances and alcohol. She ran away from home, severing all ties with her family. What drove that split remains unclear, but it was likely more than just teenage rebellion for it to be so severe. After meeting Elg in the clinic, Terry quickly moved in with him. He became her guide into Satanism, into chaos, into a life where nothing was off limits. Together, they lived in a rough part of Hyvinka and rarely left his dingy flat. Whilst there, they were joined by Mika Reiska, another lost soul and fellow patient from a psychiatric facility. Like Terry, Mika fell under Elg's influence. Elg wasn't just their friend, he became something more, a leader, a figure of a twisted authority, and soon they would take their belief in guiltless freedom to its most horrifying extreme. The next 30 seconds or so contain animal abuse, so if you don't wish to hear this, skip along. A month before the murder, in October 1998, Jano Elg carried out a deeply disturbing act. He tied his own dog to a radiator and beat it with a metal pipe, then sat back and watched it slowly die. Whether it was a display of control or a thrill of inflicting pain is unknown, but what is clear is this: Elg had no regard for life, and his mental state had become extremely dangerous. On the night of November 21st, 1998, the group of 5 individuals gathered: Jano Elg, Terry Tervashonka, Mika Reiska, an unnamed 16-year-old male, and Male A. By this time, Elg had become the leader of the group, possibly even seeing himself as a kind of cult leader. All of them dressed in black and were heavily intoxicated. They were wandering the streets of Hyvinka when they passed a church. They bumped into a group of Christians from a youth group who were hoping to help young people like Elg and the gang, who had got used to drinking heavily. The two groups began to debate about their own beliefs, with Elg being particularly forward about Christianity being a waste of time. He was also quick to correct them about Satanism not being about worshipping the devil. It seemed more like a chance for Elg and the group to gloat about their beliefs, but the confrontation was not violent, and eventually the group made their way to the train station and they hopped on the train back to Elg's flat. By this point, Male A had been getting on Elg's nerves. It's not known why, but he was not happy with him. But as usual, the group sat down together to take substances and drink. At this point, Elg put on his favourite album, The Canian Chronicle, by the band Ancient. Male A gave his own frank opinion on the album and said that he didn't care for it or the band, and that seemingly small comment was all it took to push Elg over the edge. Elg stood up and punched Male A in the face, knocking him to the ground. Almost immediately, the 16-year-old joined in. Together, they began beating him. Terry and the 16-year-old lifted Male A onto the sofa and continued to attack him. Elg left the room briefly, returning with a studded dog collar and leash. He turned the music up to full volume, drowning out any potential screams, and they fastened the collar around Male A's neck, then forced him to crawl around like a dog. This is where the cruelty was turned up a few levels. The group took turns urinating on him. They burned him with a hot iron. Male A began begging for his life, pleading that he wouldn't tell anyone if they'd just let him go. But his words meant nothing. If anything, they just angered Elg even more. Elg then grabbed a pair of scissors and began stabbing him repeatedly in the head. Afterwards, they sat him back on the sofa as the group debated what to do next. Male A saw a chance to escape. He bolted for the door, but he didn't make it. They caught him and dragged him back. To stop him from another escape, Elg asked Terry to grab him some duct tape from another room. They then taped his legs and arms together, binding him so he could no longer move. Male A was screaming for them to stop. To silence him, they also covered his entire head with duct tape. But what they didn't realise was that although he couldn't scream, he also could no longer breathe. Still unaware of what they'd done, the group continued to beat and torture him. Eventually, they noticed something had changed. He had stopped moving. He stopped struggling. At some point during the chaos, Male A had suffocated to death. But even then, it didn't end. Elg grabbed a knife and began to mutilate the body. They cut off pieces of flesh and removed his heart, intestines, and genitals. The 16-year-old, overcome by the horror, fled the scene, but Elg, Terry, and Mika stayed. They consumed parts of his flesh. They then decapitated him and then began tossing the severed head around the room like a toy. They were laughing as they did this. Afterwards, they dragged the remains into the bathroom, where they used a saw to dismember what was left of the body. The next morning, hungover and dazed, the 3 members of the group realised that they had lost the head. After searching the flat, they found it in a cupboard. They again laughed, finding it hilarious that they could lose a head. Someone had stashed it in the cupboard there during the night and forgotten. Once the head was found, one of them ripped out Male A's eyes and inserted firecrackers into the skull, blowing it apart. Later that day, Mika and the 16-year-old went for a walk and discussed what to do with the body. When they returned, Terry was scrubbing the blood from the apartment, and Elg was still sawing through what remained of the body. The group's plan was simple: dispose of the body by scattering the pieces in different rubbish bins around Hyvinka. They hoped it would be enough to erase what they'd done, but they were wrong. In the days that followed the murder, Elg and Terry were in the flat taking substances, and they stayed glued to the news, waiting to see if anyone had reported Mayele missing, or if any of the remains had been discovered. Weeks passed, then suddenly it hit the headlines. A severed leg had been found in the landfill, and not long after, all 4 of the group members were arrested. Jarno Elg showed no remorse. In court, he smiled. He claimed the murder aligned perfectly with his satanic beliefs. According to Elg, Mayele had violated 3 key rules. Do not give your opinions or advice unless asked. When in another's lair, show them respect or do not go there. And if a guest in your house annoys you, treat them cruelly and without mercy. Based on these principles, Elg believed he was entirely justified in what he had done. Only the plea portions of the trial were made public. The rest of the proceedings were held behind closed doors, driven by both the disturbing ritualistic nature of the crime and the public's hysteria surrounding Satanism at the time. No press or members of the public were allowed in. During those limited visible moments, Elg sat in court, smirking. He was eventually found guilty of murder, as well as the torture and killing of his own dog. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but in Finland, that meant a minimum of just 12 years. Terry Tervashonka was deemed partially insane after a psychiatric evaluation, though still capable of understanding right from wrong. She received 8.5 years. Mika Reiska was found guilty of assault, cannibalism, and disposing of a body, and was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months. The 16-year-old male was found not guilty, judged to have been manipulated by the older members of the group. Years later, Elg began receiving day release from prison, but this was revoked after he assaulted 2 customers and a waiter during a bar fight, one of whom was knocked unconscious. Still, in 2016, after serving 17 years, Elg was released. He completed the education he had missed in his youth and reportedly works full-time in an undisclosed location. He has not been in trouble since. Could he have been rehabilitated? Terry's life after prison was much more chaotic. She served just 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2003. She changed her name, moved away, and found work, but on June 7th, 2007, she got into a violent argument over substances in a pub and stabbed a man in the face repeatedly with a billhook. He died instantly. It was Terry herself who called the police and confessed. She was sentenced to another 10 years for that murder. While serving that sentence, she married another inmate who was also a convicted killer. In 2011, she escaped prison but was eventually recaptured and forced to finish her sentence. Later, she got in trouble again for trying to smuggle substances into the prison for her husband. Reports suggest Terry has been clean since 2013. After her release, she and her husband moved away for a fresh start. They had a youth together, and to date, she has not reoffended. In a year 2000 interview, Terry expressed no guilt over the killing of Mayele. She claimed she did not consider it murder. According to her, the group were completely intoxicated and had merely tied up and silenced a member who had become a bit noisy using duct tape, without realizing that it would cause him to suffocate. She also denied that the murder had any connection to devil worship. Due to the hysteria around satanic worship at the time, and the brutal nature of the murder, this case was locked away by Finnish authorities until 2038. I think there was even more horrors that took place that night that we are still not aware of. It's crazy to think that all of them are now free and living their lives as they wish. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane. These chilling images capture Miguel Cortez Miranda moments after his arrest in Mexico City, dubbed by the media as the Mexican Jeffrey Dahmer because Cortez keeps the remains of his victims in his apartment for his own twisted pleasure. He even wrote coded confessions that he posted on his social media, but unfortunately they went unnoticed, allowing him to continue his killing spree undetected for 12 years, claiming as many as 35 victims. His method was meticulous. He documented his sinister progression in a diary, describing with pride how he evolved and refined his ability to kill. In this unsettling photo, taken immediately after his final murder, Cortez's expression is haunting, not a hint of remorse, only an eerie, satisfied smile. It's as if he is relieved, eager even to finally share his grotesque deeds with the world. Cortez is a classic serial killer in the modern day. He should have been stopped so many times, but somehow he kept slipping through the cracks. The way he talks about his victims is truly disturbing. On April 16th, 2024, in the La Cruz neighborhood of Iztacalco, Mexico City, 17-year-old Maria Jose was sat in her bedroom studying for exams, unaware that her life was about to take a horrifying turn. She lived in a modest apartment with her mother, 38-year-old Cassandra Calles, and her sister. That day, Cassandra left the apartment to run errands. With her sister already out, Maria was left home alone, a situation that had never raised concern before. They had lived in the building for years. It felt safe. But what no one knew was that danger was lurking outside, watching, waiting. Miguel Cortez Miranda lived in the same building and was their seemingly harmless neighbor. He had passed them in the hall countless times, offering polite smiles and casual hellos, just enough to seem friendly, but never personable. He had studied their routines, learning when they came and went. On that day, he waited outside, knowing Cassandra would soon leave. Once she did, he slipped back into the building, climbed in a window, and entered the apartment. It wasn't difficult for him. He had been inside before. Unbeknownst to the family, Cortez had broken in on multiple occasions already while they were out, mapping the space and rehearsing his approach. But this time, it was real. He crept through the flat and made his way to Maria's bedroom and opened the door. When she looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, she screamed. Cortez tried to de-escalate the situation. "Calm down," he said. "I don't want to hurt you. I haven't done anything. I'm not here to attack you." Maria screamed back at him, "Get out, go away." Cortez later claimed her screams triggered something inside him. He felt an urge to scream too, to lose control, and that's exactly what he did. He lunged at her, his hands closing around her throat and beginning to strangle her. She struggled, fighting to free herself, but he overpowered her, dragging her to the ground. He kept his grip until her movement slowed down. Then he let go. Her breathing was deep and sounded pained. She was alive, but barely. Then came the most chilling part. Cortez went to the kitchen, grabbed a plastic bag, and returned. He placed it over her head, using it to continue to suffocate her without the use of his hands. Then he began to intimately assault her. He later admitted that he used the plastic bag so that she would continue to suffocate no matter which position he put her body in. This was a calculated and vile act. But before he was finished, the front door opened. Cassandra was home. She heard a noise from her daughter's room, and sensing something was wrong, she rushed to check. What she found shattered her world. Cortez standing over Maria, whose body lay motionless with a bag over her head. Panic turned to survival. Cassandra screamed. Cortez attacked her, striking her in the head and throwing her to the ground. He ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife and returned. In a frenzied attack, he stabbed Cassandra multiple times in the lung, pelvis and throat as she screamed for help. She fought back fiercely, clawing at his face and leaving deep scratch marks. In the last attempt to silence her, he tried to push her out the window, but Cassandra grabbed hold of the curtains and held on. Enraged, he flung her onto the bed where she passed out. As Cortez fled the scene, neighbors who heard the screams chased after him and alerted the police. When officers arrived, Cassandra, barely conscious, managed to drag herself to the front door and open it. She was rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. She told them that her attacker was her neighbor. Tragically, Maria was pronounced dead at the scene. Later, Maria's aunt, Angela Calles, spoke about her niece and quote, "She always asked her mom's permission to go outside. She wasn't a bad girl. This has been so hard for us. It's like someone stole her dreams. She'll never get married, never finish her career. She'll never be able to help her mom." Maria was a bright student, full of hope. She had been studying business administration, dreaming of buying her mother a home one day. She was kind, ambitious, and innocent. She wanted to start riding a motorbike like her dad, who had intended to buy her one for her 18th birthday. But now, this was over. Because of one senseless act of evil, her life was taken away. Cortez was first detained by quick-thinking neighbors who had heard Cassandra's screams. But it wasn't long before officers arrived and officially placed him under arrest. At that moment, they believed they had just caught a violent murderer, someone who had committed a horrific but isolated act. What they didn't realize was that they were only beginning to uncover something far more sinister. As investigators began to search his apartment, the full truth started to emerge. Inside his home, officers discovered a nightmarish collection of at least 20 human remains and 5 skulls, believed to belong to at least 6 different victims. Bloodstains were all over the walls. Alongside the remains were ID cards from 20 different women, alongside women's clothing and jewelry, kept as trophies. Personal documents and chemical substances were also found, along with a saw, leading officers to believe that he may have been disposing of these remains by dissolving them in acid. They also found a diary where he had documented his crimes and talked about his progression as a killer. This was no longer just a murder case. What the police had found was the lair of a suspected serial killer, one who had hidden in plain sight, blending in whilst leading a dark, double life. The evidence was damning. Cortez wasn't just a killer. He was methodical. He was prolific. And he had been doing this for far longer than anyone could have imagined. But who was Miguel Cortez Miranda? And what fueled his hatred towards women? Known to the public as the Mexican Jeffrey Dahmer, Miguel Cortez Miranda was born on October 25, 1984, in Mexico City's Gustavo A. Madero borough. On the surface, his upbringing seemed normal. He had a younger sister named Claudia. His father, a bacterial chemist, was a strict but accomplished man, whilst his mother stayed at home to take care of the children and family life. Both siblings excelled academically. They were bright, focused and driven, traits encouraged by their demanding father. Both Cortez and his sister pursued chemistry like their father, but soon Cortez stood out, impressing teachers with his intelligence. But behind his academic brilliance festered bitterness. No matter how well he performed, it was Claudia who received the praise. Cortez would later claim that he was abused by his father, And what hurt even more was that his mother and sister, he said, did nothing to protect him. Although his sister has said that they were both abused by their father, not just him. But maybe Cortez felt he got it worse. Resentment grew like rot beneath his quiet exterior. He became isolated and socially withdrawn, and disturbingly began to exhibit signs of cruelty. Despite his academic success, he spent his free time creating various acids and using them to damage cars or worse, harm animals. He took pleasure in their pain, and it was an early glimpse of what was to come. At age 23, with flawless academic credentials, he secured a job in a lab specializing in food and water analysis. By 25, he was working at North Laboratorio Clinic, a prestigious facility. Though he thrived professionally, his co-workers described him as distant and awkward, especially around women. Online, Cortez had a small social media account with about 30 friends and used it mostly to share his successes and travels. He often flew to different countries for adventure. He also spoke 3 languages. To those who knew him casually, he was well-mannered, cultured, and even admirable. No one suspected the darkness beneath. But everything changed in 2012. That year, he moved into an apartment near his workplace, an apartment that would become the epicenter of a nightmare. It was here he met 21-year-old Frida Sofia Lima Riviera, a student who had left her humble home in Zacualpan de Amilpas to attend university. By chance, she moved into the same neighborhood as Cortez. They struck up a friendship. At first, it seemed harmless, but then Cortez gave her a book titled Perfume, The Story of a Murderer. A chilling gift in hindsight. The novel follows a man who distills the scent of virgins into perfume through murder. Frida, seemingly unaware of the sinister undertone, shared photos with Cortez and affectionately referred to him as a father figure. He was 28 and she was now 22. By early 2013, their relationship had deepened. They began traveling together. He even quit his job, possibly to be with her more. At one point, they visited her family. During the Cholula Fair, Cortez was thought to now be her boyfriend, but the mask was beginning to slip. In October 2013, whilst out of work, Cortez joined an animal rights activist group. He would later say he took this role as he was able to meet women, but the people there quickly saw a different side of him. They described him as aggressive and volatile. He didn't stay long. By February 2014, he had taken a new job at Nuco, a laboratory specializing in vitamins. He lasted only a month before being fired. Shortly after, he began posting eerie poems on Facebook, messages that no one paid much attention to. Then, on December 7th, 2014, Frida posted a cryptic message. "I'm not going back where I came from. I never look back." It was the last time anyone ever heard from her. Frida vanished. 2 months later, on February 7th, 2015, her worried family traveled 3 hours to Mexico City to file a missing persons report. The police were dismissive. They assumed she had run off with a boyfriend and assured the family that she'd return. But Frida's loved ones knew better. She had never disappeared like this before. Months dragged on, 3, 4, 5 months, until the family realized no one was coming to help. There was no media coverage, no investigation, no urgency. It was as if Frida never existed. Meanwhile, Cortez went on with his life. A month after her disappearance, he began sharing disturbing images of dead animals, murder cases, and infamous killers. He even mocked law enforcement online, calling them useless. He was hiding in plain sight. On October 23rd, 2015, he posted a poem on his Facebook titled, "I Will Miss You." It read, "It didn't take me long to realize that your hands weren't moving. I discovered that your body was stiff, and I was scared when I noticed that you were cold. I touched your back, and it was nothing but your clothes. I touched your neck, and it was nothing but stone, cold rock, like ice, hard as an iron, and worst of all, motionless like a statue. My face changed, now because I felt it, and because of my tears. Tears of happiness turned into tears of despair. I wanted to be by your side, but not like this." He was describing spending time with Frida's body after her death. In another passage, he detailed her decomposition. It took some time for the blood in your body to begin to dry. Cracks formed that cut through your skin. Your fingers began to break apart, and your whole body fragmented. You turned to dust. Still, no one realized what he was really talking about. It just seemed normal that he would write strange, dark poems on his social media. Years later, after Cortez was finally arrested for the brutal murder of 17-year-old Maria Jose, police searched his apartment and found a diary that documented his crimes. In it, another poem about Frida was discovered. This time, it was way more direct. "Frida, I have missed you now for 8 months. I saw you die. You died buried under small pieces of glass. Your skin was stained with blood and your body turned bright red. Covered in blood, I placed you on an altar and cried at your feet. I decided to stay with you, or rather, with your lifeless body. I would wait for you to open your eyes at any moment, or simply succumb at your feet." His words shown that there was no remorse, no guilt, only some form of a twisted satisfaction. The diary, the poems, all revealed one horrifying truth. Miguel Cortez Miranda wasn't just a murderer, he was a predator. The contents of Cortez's diary were nothing short of horrific, a window into the mind of a meticulous and remorseless killer. Page after page revealed the chilling details of how he stalked his victims, how he refined his methods with each attack, and how he took pride in his ability to improve as a murderer. One of the most disturbing entries described an act so monstrous it is almost beyond comprehension: the disposal of a newborn. According to the diary, Cortez had fathered a child with a former girlfriend. Unwilling to accept the consequences, he wrote in haunting detail how he got rid of the infant, using the same methods he reserved for his victims, dissolving the remains in acid and disposing of what little was left. Cold, calculated, and inhuman. The earliest crime detailed in his diary dates back to 2012. The victim was Karen Hornelas Baltasar, a 21-year-old chemist who worked in the same laboratory as Cortez. He was her superior. Cortez became infatuated with her. Despite his best efforts to win her affection, she rejected him. Karen had no romantic interest in Cortez. She was already in a relationship, but rejection wasn't something Cortez could handle. As her 22nd birthday approached, he saw an opportunity. He offered to host her birthday party at his flat, disguising his obsession as generosity. On Saturday, December 1st, 2012, the party went ahead as planned. Friends and colleagues attended, and Karen had a great time. She even posted on Facebook, expressing how loved and appreciated she felt. At around 6 a.m, Karen decided to leave and head home. Cortez, the calculated predator, offered to walk her to make sure she was safe. He told the remaining guests he had errands to run afterwards, so he would be gone for a few hours. He returned at 1 p.m, casually rejoining the gathering as if nothing had happened. The next day, Karen was reported missing. She never made it home. Her family was frantic. Tragically, she was found dead not long after. The official cause, alcohol-related choking, and the authorities believed it was an accidental death. but something didn't add up. Those at the party knew Karen wasn't intoxicated enough to choke to death. Her behaviour had been normal when she left, and the most unsettling of all, those who knew Cortez began to suspect him. He left the apartment for 7 hours. It didn't feel right, but they had no proof. No one could act on a feeling alone. Cortez was sacked from his position only a few days after the incident. He strangled Karen to death. It was his first known kill, and he almost got caught. But he didn't. Instead, he learned. And just weeks later, he met Frida. There is a strong possibility that Karen Hornales wasn't Cortez's first victim. Just months before her death, in 2012, 18-year-old Mariani Roblero Gonzalez disappeared under mysterious circumstances. In the morning, she left for school at precisely 8:50 a.m. on a seemingly normal day, but by 8 p.m, when her mother returned home and found she had not come back, the sense of dread began to set in. She was reported missing, but from the start, the investigation was riddled with failure. The family had told the authorities that it was Cortez who was the last person known to be with her. He was helping her with a project for her studies. CCTV footage from the area wasn't secured in time. It was erased before the authorities requested it. Phone records were checked and found nothing incriminating between the communication between Cortez and Mariani. It appeared she had simply vanished. A reward of 1.5 million pesos was offered for any information leading to her being found, but even the missing persons posters were botched. Some claimed she was 32, others said 21, but in reality, she was just 18. The family fought for answers, but the system failed them. Her father, broken and exhausted, would later say, "I feel as if my daughter is no longer here. I have to accept that." For 14 long years, Mariani remained a ghost, another unsolved disappearance in a city all too familiar with them. But then came the discovery of Cortez's diary. Buried within its pages, among the detailed accounts of his crimes, was her name, written not once, but multiple times. There was no official mention of Mariani being one of his confirmed victims, but with the name appearing repeatedly, was this coincidence? Highly unlikely. Given what we know now about Cortez, the calculated way he stalked and preyed upon his victims, it's entirely plausible that Mariani may have been his first kill. In 2018, Cortez found his next victim, Viviana Elizabeth Garrido Ibarra, a 32-year-old biomedical engineering graduate who had just secured a position at the same laboratory where Cortez worked. The two became casually friendly, not close, but just enough for him to learn her routines. On November 30th, 2018, Viviana took the metro after her shift, accompanied by a friend. The train brought her to within 30 meters of her apartment, just a few seconds walk from safety. She never made it home. Viviana had a husband and a 9-year-old daughter. It was her husband who had reported her missing. The case quickly caught media attention, but disturbingly, some outlets turned the blame on her, suggesting that she should have been more careful. The implication was deeply unfair. Viviana's sister responded with action. She created missing persons posters, painted a mural of her sister at the metro station where she vanished, and also fought to have CCTV cameras properly installed and maintained so that no other woman would just vanish like she did. All of Viviana's co-workers were questioned, including Cortez, but no red flags were raised. He slipped through the cracks once again. Her body was never recovered. Given what we know now about Cortez's methods, it is likely that Viviana's remains were taken to his apartment and eventually dissolved like the others. In 2019, Claudia Andrea became another victim. She was a 36-year-old chemistry student who had moved into the area in 2013. She also mysteriously vanished. She and Cortez had dated briefly, but in 2019, she was found dead in her apartment, alone, decomposing, and seemingly forgotten. The initial assumption was that she had died of natural causes. No foul play was suspected. It wasn't until months later, when her family checked her bank accounts, that something more sinister surfaced. Someone had been spending her money after she had died. The connection to Cortez was never officially made, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. Too many women, too many coincidences, too many red flags missed. Authorities had interviewed Cortez in connection with several disappearances and deaths over the years. The warning signs were there, staring them in the face, yet somehow the pieces were never put together until it was too late. And that is perhaps the most terrifying part of all. He was right there, in plain sight. There are many more cases, too many, that follow the same pattern. Women who crossed paths with Miguel Cortez Miranda simply vanished. Inside his diary were over 35 names. Women listed like case files. Some entries were detailed and clinical, breaking down how he stalked, abducted, and murdered them. Others were more cryptic. Alongside the names, police found 20 ID cards belonging to various women, but 5 of them were confirmed to still be alive. Were they next on the list? It's a terrifying thought and insight into how far he planned. During interrogation, Cortez spoke calmly and in detail about how after he had spent time with the victims' remains, he would dismember each of their limbs, how he dissolved their limbs in acid, one piece at a time. He even timed it with a stopwatch, taking pride in knowing exactly how long it would take for each body part to vanish based on the size and weight. There was no remorse, no emotion, just precision. So far, 3 victims have been confirmed through DNA analysis, but authorities have withheld their identities to the public. Still, the diary is enough to tell us what he is. Cortez's trial was set for April 14th, 2025, but the case presented major legal complications. For now, he could only be tried for the murder of Maria Jose and the attempted murder of her mother Cassandra. Authorities were still untangling the web of his 14-year crime spree, but even without the full extent of charges, the evidence was overwhelming. If convicted, he faced a minimum of 78 years in prison, a life sentence for a man of his age. Then came the final twist. Just one day before his trial, Cortez collapsed in his prison cell. Hours before he was due to be transferred to court, he suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. He was rushed to the general hospital, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead on arrival. Miguel Cortez Miranda died at age 40, taking many of his secrets with him. His sister Claudia spoke to the media, still in disbelief. She said, "He was very different. In the family, everyone considered him quiet. He never showed aggression. At work, he was polite, respectful to my cousins, to everyone. He was considered hardworking and intelligent, the calmest among us, the one who had achieved the most. We all thought he was a good person. The last few times I saw him, he seemed fine. He spoke well, seemed calm. We never imagined he was a monster. It never crossed our minds." In the end, this case wasn't just about the horror one man inflicted. It was about all the warning signs missed and all the dots left unconnected. Had Cassandra not come home early that day? Had she not walked in at that exact time? It's likely Miguel Cortez Miranda would still be out there, still hunting, still hiding in plain sight. And that is perhaps the most terrifying thought of all. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.
Оператор 112.
Девушка, вы слышите, как она орет там за дверью?
Я что должна сделать-то?
Где милиция?
Чего так разговариваете?
А как мне дверь-то открыть, там ее убьют сегодня?
Полиция приедет, не надо материться.
In the early hours of January 14th, 2012, at around 3 a.m, a woman's desperate screams shattered the quiet corridors of an apartment block. Flat number 738 was a peaceful place that a young couple had been renting, but now had become the scene of a nightmare. Her cries were so piercing that 15 residents gathered in the hallway, desperate to help. But the apartment had an iron door which separated them from the horror inside. "Help me, he's going to kill me," she screamed from the other side. With the neighbours' hearts pounding, they called the police, and for 3.5 hours, frantic calls flooded the authorities. These calls would later become part of a separate investigation in a case that would cause huge national outrage in Russia. A woman begged for her life, and those on the other side of the iron door could do nothing but listen. This case sparked major controversy in Russia and remains one of the most talked about cases to this day. Keep watching till the end, as it's got another twist. Vera Pekteleva was born on September 24th, 1997, in the town of Kiselev in the Kemerovo region, Russia. Vera was known for her gentle nature. From a young age, she displayed talents in creative writing and singing. She would take singing lessons and enter regional competitions and even win. Her family fully expected her to pursue a career in the arts, but she chose a different route after graduation. Enrolling in a technical university, Vera chose to study economic security with a clear goal in mind. She wanted to fight corruption. Vera's family was somewhat complicated, but filled with love. Her parents Oksana and Evgen had separated when she was still a child, yet both remained deeply committed to raising her. Even after Evgen remarried, Vera was treated as part of his new family. She was welcomed during the holidays and was never made to feel like an outsider by her other siblings. Her university was only a few hours away from her mother's home in Kiselev, so Vera frequently visited, especially during the holidays. Her relationship with her mother, Oksana, was incredibly close. They confided in one another about nearly every aspect of their lives, which only deepened their bond over time. In 2017, during one of her visits to her mother's house, Vera was at a house party with friends when she made contact with an old classmate called Vladislav Kanis, known as Vlad. They got on great, and by 2017, they began dating. Vlad had endured a far more troubled upbringing. His mother abandoned the family, leaving Vlad and his brother, Stanislav, to be raised by their father. But when Vlad's father committed a crime, something rumoured to be involving a theft, he ended everything with a hunting rifle. Vlad witnessed the traumatic event. It left deep scars on his psyche. Vlad dropped out of school after 9th grade without any aspirations. He was withdrawn, known for his bad temper and physical aggression. He had a criminal conviction for robbery, a habit for excessive drinking, and though intelligent, he was a bully. It was no surprise that Vera's parents disapproved of the relationship. They knew the family well, and her father had urged her to leave Vlad, while her mother believed that Vlad was simply taking advantage of her. Yet Vera believed she could change him, that her love might soften his edges. She seemed happy, posting pictures of them on social media. The pair looked every bit the typical young couple in love, but cracks were already forming. In 2019, Vera moved into a flat in Kemerovo near her university. Her parents helped to pay for the rent, and soon after, Vlad moved in with her. This was when the darker side of their relationship began to emerge. Vlad refused to help with household chores, never found a job, and spent his days drinking. Oksana, sensing danger, warned Vera over the phone that Vlad was manipulating her. Her friend said the same thing, telling Vera that Vlad was using her for financial support. But Vera didn't listen. Instead, she started to hide their relationship. Vlad stopped attending family gatherings, and Vera no longer posted pictures of them on social media together. Vlad became her secret, a hidden part of her life that she tried to manage alone. Vera's parents believed that she was being physically abused by Vlad. I can only imagine the frustration they must have been going through at this point. But in the autumn of 2019, after arguing too many times, being hit, and realizing he was never going to change, she decided to leave him, much to the relief of her parents. She wanted things to be civil and moved out of her own flat, taking with her only essential items, and moved into the university dorms. Vlad literally stayed living in the apartment, even allowing Vera's parents to pay for another month's rent, whilst Vera wasn't even living there. He did not agree to the split and refused to accept reality. He would later tell his brother that she would either be with him or he would kill her. Unfortunately, his brother Stanislav did not take this seriously and thought it was more emotions running high. Over the coming weeks, Vera had been trying to arrange to pick up the rest of her belongings. She had called many times, but was either ignored or Vlad claimed to be busy. But suddenly, out of the blue, Vlad called Vera on the 12th of January 2020, and they arranged for her to pick up her belongings the next day. Vlad would later give his version of events during interrogation. He said, and quote, "When I called Vera on January 12th, I offered to help her move her remaining belongings to another apartment. Vera agreed to my offer to meet and move things. We agreed that I would help her with the move. On January 13th, we agreed to meet in the afternoon. She was supposed to come to me for her things. On January 13th, at around 4 or 6 p.m, Vera came to me. When she came, we packed both her and my things because I wanted to move out of this apartment too. I didn't want to live there without Vera. While packing, we drank alcohol, mainly beer and vodka. After that, I felt drunk, and Vera was also drunk. We drank alcohol until about 5 a.m. on January 14th. There were no conflicts between us when we were drinking, but when I started talking about our relationship, suggested we get back together, and told her that I knew she was seeing another guy, a conflict between us started. She didn't like it. After that, she started swearing, insulting me, hitting me. She kicked me at least 5 times in the groin area and hit me in the face at least 8 times with her palm. I didn't feel any pain when she slapped me. However, when she kicked me between the legs, I experienced physical pain. Vera started hitting me first. It made me angry. As I said, this was Vlad's version of events, but it did not match up with the facts of that night. But it shows his lack of remorse, his inability to acknowledge what he did. In truth, Vera had an exam the next day, so she wanted to be in and out of that flat as quickly as possible. She had asked a friend to meet her back at the dorm at 6 p.m. to help her carry her belongings. When at the flat at 5:08 p.m, Vera left a voice message to her friend.
Так, Зай, ну смотри, я еще тут, я сейчас собираю вещи, блядь, нахуя всего. Ну, в принципе, смотри, я думаю, мне полчаса еще хватит. На такси я доеду, ну да, надеюсь, в 6 где-то я буду в общаге. Ну, я тебе, как и говорила, 6, вот прям 6:30. Я не знаю, ты можешь к 6, в принципе, подъехать и поможешь мне поднять, если что, все.
Then a second message is sent. Vera and Vlad are having a disagreement.
Нет, я тебе сразу говорю, что сюда никто не зайдет. И...
Я буду выходить.
Нет, Вер, все равно не надо. Это то, что там человек будет тебя стоять, ждать, и там все потом...
А чё?
Ну, потому что...
Then a third message is sent. It's said quietly.
Кир, едь сюда.
Then a fourth message is sent. In the background, you can also hear Vlad.
Зай, короче, смотри, мне надо 30-40 минут. Ну, серьезно, просто вот по факту я смотрю на вещи, 30-40 минут это
Короче,
прям
она тебе
максимум.
напишет, когда мы закончим. Все, пока,
Зай.
просто жди.
I believe that the physical abuse would have started shortly after this message. Then, at 7:19 p.m, A final voice note was sent. It was from Vlad himself.
Кира, пожалуйста, я тебя прошу серьезно, отстань, отдохни пока что сейчас элементарно. Мне нужен этот человек в данный момент, и она со мной находится вместе. Мне это важно и нужно. Хватит, пожалуйста, не надо ни в чем помогать. Я и сам абсолютно во всем сегодня помогу. Просто уйди сегодня, пожалуйста.
Her friend left the couple to it, seemingly believing that they were working things out. Only Vlad knows what happened for the next few hours, but I can imagine it was horrific. Then at 3 a.m, in the early hours of January 14th, 2012, the desperate screams of Vera shattered the silence of the apartment block's corridors. At first, it was only the apartments next door that came outside to see what the commotion was. But soon, people from all over the block gathered outside the door of the apartment, listening to her cries for help. They called the police.
Здравствуйте, нам бы полицию вызвать. А то у соседей какая-то бойня происходит. Девушка орет прямо истерически.
Вызов сотрудникам полиции передали, направят экипаж для разбирательства.
Помогите, спасите, орет благим матом. У меня тут соседи даже вышли уже с других квартир. Стучимся, дверь не открывается, она кричит «помогите», и все.
Vlad never truly intended to help Vera move out. His offer had been nothing more than a calculated ploy, a desperate attempt to win her back. He had stocked up on beer, liquor, and a bottle of vodka, perhaps hoping the alcohol would loosen the tension between them. But it became painfully clear that Vera had no plans of rekindling their relationship. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. Fueled by a toxic mix of rage and alcohol, the attack began. Later, during the interrogation, he would insist that he had only struck Vera 4 times, claiming that it was with the palm of his hand. He tried to explain that she had hit her head on the cupboard when she fell, but his excuses didn't stop there. Vlad confessed to strangling her with an iron's cord, not to kill her, he said, but only to make her pass out. Anything to silence her scream. In truth, Vlad hit her over 100 times and tortured her for 3.5 hours. She was punched and kicked in the face, resulting in a broken nose and ribs. She was beaten all over her body, and a pathologist would later say that she had bruises, abrasions, cuts and lacerations all over her. He also forced himself on her. Vlad could have ended this quickly, but he wanted to inflict as much pain as possible for as long as possible. At some points, Vera ran to the iron door, banging on it, screaming for help, but the neighbours could not break through the iron. Vlad could be heard pulling her back. Again, the neighbours phoned the police.
Девушка, ну а где экипаж?
Я переключала вас на полицию. Что они вам сказали?
Они нам ничего не ответили, они отключились.
In the next call, Vera can be heard in the background, at the door, screaming for help.
Оператор 112.
Девушка, вы слышите, как она орет там за дверью?
Я что должна сделать-то?
Где милиция?
Чего так разговариваете?
А как мне дверь-то открыть, там ее убьют сегодня,
Полиция приедет, не надо материться.
Vlad plunged the knife into Vera twice, but it wasn't enough to satisfy his twisted rage. He grabbed a sharper blade and stabbed her 5 more times, slowly, as if he wanted to stretch out her suffering. Outside, neighbours scrambled desperately, trying to find anything that could break through the iron door. Their panic grew with every scream they heard from inside the apartment, making frantic calls to the police, powerless as the horror unfolded. Can you imagine it, being so close to somebody as they're brutally murdered, hearing their dying screams, and yet there is nothing you can do? Horrifying. One of the people outside the door was Vlad's own brother, Slatislav. Vlad had spoken to him on the phone earlier that day, and something in the conversation unsettled Slatislav enough to rush to the apartment. He knew that they had to get the door open. Vera's life depended on it. Over the span of 3.5 agonizing hours, neighbors made 7 frantic calls to the police. All the while, desperate cries for help echoed down the hall, mixed with the sickening sound of her being beaten. Then, just before dawn, at around 6:30 a.m, there was a chilling final exchange. Vera, who was near the door, fell silent. Vlad's voice was heard. "Vera, forgive me," he said softly. "I love you very much." A dull thud followed. Vlad had struck the final, fatal blow to the back of Vera's skull, causing devastating brain trauma. But even then, he wasn't finished. He wrapped the iron's cord around her lifeless body, strangling her for good measure. During the autopsy, it was determined that Vera had been killed not once, but 3 times. First by the torture and stabbing, again by the blow to her skull, and finally by strangulation. It was also proven that she was physically hit for the first time 6 hours before she died. A short while after the final noises were heard, one of the neighbours found a metal crowbar in a parking lot nearby. They started to pry the door open, and after what must have felt like an eternity, they managed to force it open. What they saw inside was a scene of pure horror. Blood smeared on the walls, even spatter on the ceiling, and there, on the floor, lay Vera's lifeless body. She had been brutally murdered. In the bathroom, they found Vlad, drunk and slumped on the floor, a bloody kitchen knife still clutched in his hand. It was nearly 7 a.m. when one of the female neighbours, shaken to the core, made one final call to the police.
Алло, здравствуйте. 1,5 часа назад вызывали службу. До сих пор никто не приехал. Своими силами взломали дверь, девушка уже мертва. Наши действия. Что с девушкой? Девушка уже мертва. 1,5 часа вызывали службы для спасения. Девушка орала: «Помогите, спасите». Никто не помог и не спас. Почему у нас службы так долго едут и почему у нас службы никак не работают?
Vlad had tried to escape, but the neighbours stopped him. The police only arrived after Vera was already dead. But why didn't they come when she was alive? They had time to save her. This failure sparked national outrage across Russia. Footage of the emergency operators was released, showing them casually sipping tea, seemingly unfazed by the frantic calls from the neighbours, while Vlad tortured Vera. Instead of urgency, they seemed more concerned with the tone of the callers, brushing off their cries for help. The sergeant on duty that night, Michael Balasov, later claimed he only had one patrol car left, which he sent to check on an elderly man found dead. Then, after a shift change, the new chief in charge, Dmitry Saracen, also received calls about Vera's situation. His excuse? There was no petrol and no available cars. Yet, investigations revealed that Balasov had sufficient fuel. And even if he didn't, he failed to take the necessary measures afterwards. The most gut-wrenching part of this tragedy is that Vera could have been saved. The case went to court, and the 3 operators were charged with neglect of official duties. They were found guilty and sentenced to suspended sentences of 1.5 to 2.5 years. None of them lost their jobs. Instead, they were ordered to pay Vera's family a small sum of around £300 each. Despite their failure, they remained on duty. Justice, it seemed, had failed Vera twice. Just after his arrest, Vlad claimed that he did not kill Vera and that she was not dead. He said, and quote, "I saw an iron that was on the floor. I took this iron and I wrapped the iron cord around Vera's neck. After that, I tightened the cord around her neck slightly. I squeezed her neck for 1.5 or 2 minutes. At that time, I didn't realize that I could kill Vera with my actions. I didn't want to kill Vera. I was tightening the cord around Vera's neck because I wanted to scare her. I wanted her to lose consciousness. I wanted her to fall asleep for 15 minutes. After I removed the cord from her neck, she started making sounds, coughing or wheezing. When I removed the cord from Vera's neck, she was in a vulnerable position, but then I put her on her back. At that moment, she was unconscious. At the same time, she made sounds, that is, wheezed. I thought she was fine. After a while, I started waking Vera up, but she was unresponsive. Then I started listening to whether her heart was beating. I put my ear to her mouth, then to her heart. She had no pulse. She wasn't breathing. I don't remember what happened next. I remember that at some point I ended up in the bathroom. During the investigation, and faced with the facts, Vlad came round more to what he had done. He said, and quote, "I don't remember how many times I hit her, but I think it's the same number as indicated by the expert. I admit I caused all her injuries, indicated in the report. I wanted silence. I did not think about her suffering. She screamed and insulted me during our conflict. I didn't enjoy hitting her. When I hit her, I didn't like her screaming. I wanted her to shut up." The funeral home, who had Vera's body, spent hours trying to make her face presentable, but her mother, Oksana, said that she was unrecognizable. Over 1,000 people attended the service in a small church. Many had to stand outside. In court, Vlad would later say, "I'm sorry for what I did. I do not deny that it was my actions that caused Vera's death. I didn't want to kill her. I want to apologize to Vera's family." On the 28th of July, 2022, Vlad was sentenced to 17 years in a strict regime colony and ordered to pay Vera's family roughly £30,000 in compensation. This did not seem enough for the pain and sheer brutality of his crime. But things got even worse. In April 2023, after spending mere months in prison, Vlad was pardoned. He went and fought on the front line in the Russian army, and after serving 6 months, he was a free man again. Vera's family found out when a photo of Vlad surfaced online. Vera's mother, Oksana, said, and quote, "My child will rot in her grave. I've been deprived of everything. My life, any hope, I don't live. I exist." And he is pardoned, with release from further serving his sentence. His criminal record is now expunged. This simply finishes me off. It just pushes me into a dead end. I don't know what to do next. It just feels that Vera was let down multiple times. It's hard for me to fathom the police not being more proactive in trying to get help, and those neighbours must be haunted by what they went through. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.